Most people think a relationship ends with a bang, a massive argument, a slammed door, or a tear-filled goodbye in a parking lot. But for an empath, the true end happens in total silence. There is a specific quiet moment where their soul simply decides it's finished. It isn't fueled by a single betrayal or a grand dramatic event. Instead, it's like a light switch being flipped off in a room you didn't even realize was dimming. This invisible exit usually arrives on a completely unremarkable day. They might be staring out the window, washing the dishes, or folding a pile of laundry when the realization hits. They are done. In that split second, something inside them stops reaching for you. The bridge they spent years building and maintaining is suddenly gone. What makes this so disorienting for the other person is that the empath doesn't immediately pack their bags or stop talking. They might still sit across from you at dinner, laugh at your jokes, and ask how your day was. But the access has been revoked. You no longer have entry to their deepest thoughts, their vibrant energy, or the sanctuary of their emotional world. They haven't stopped being kind, but they have stopped being vulnerable. You are now talking to a version of them that is polite, but protected. They are physically there, but the version of them that made you feel like the most understood person on the planet has left the building. By the time you actually notice the distance, the empath has usually been gone for months. They aren't leaving out of spite. They are leaving because they simply have nothing left to give to a place where they aren't safe. We need to shatter the common myth about what an empath actually is. Society often labels them as fragile or weak, the kind of person who is easily overwhelmed, cries at every sad commercial, and needs a week to recover from a minor disagreement. This is a complete misunderstanding of their nature. Being an empath isn't about being soft. It's about having a nervous system that is hyper-tuned to the world around them. It is a biological level of attunement that most people genuinely cannot comprehend. They don't just read the room, they are the room. Their brains are wired with an incredibly active mirror neuron system, meaning they don't just observe your pain or your stress, they actually process it within their own bodies. This isn't a personality quirk or a choice. It's a constant high-stakes physiological experience. While you might think you're hiding your irritation or your lie behind a smile, the empath has already registered the micro shift in your energy, the slight tension in your jaw, and the heavy weight of your silence. They know your "I'm fine" is a lie because they can feel the truth vibrating in the air. This level of awareness is exhausting. Every interaction they have comes with a hidden tax, a cost to their own peace and energy. They have likely spent years paying that tax for you, absorbing your moods and smoothing over your rough edges. They aren't fragile. They are incredibly resilient for having carried the weight of two people's emotions for so long. When they finally walk away, it's not because they couldn't handle the heat. It's because they finally realized they were the only ones holding the fire. There is a massive misconception that empaths walk away because they are too soft or too sensitive to handle a disagreement. People assume they run at the first sign of trouble because they can't stomach a fight. The truth is actually the exact opposite. Empaths are often the most resilient people in any relationship. They are absolute experts at navigating conflict. They can handle a loud argument, they can handle a difficult conversation, and they can handle seeing the worst parts of someone they love. What they cannot handle, what eventually breaks them, is invisible conflict. This is the toxic gap between what you are saying with your mouth and what you are actually projecting with your energy. It's the passive aggressiveness, the hidden resentment, and the subtle cold shoulder that you deny is happening. When an empath asks, "What's wrong?" and you respond with a sharp, "Nothing," You are forcing their nervous system to reconcile two conflicting realities. You are telling them they are crazy for feeling the very real tension you are emitting, and that gaslighting of their own senses is what creates the heaviest burden they carry. Because of how they are wired, empaths don't just observe your pain or your anger, they absorb it like a sponge. When you wound them, their first instinct isn't usually to strike back or defend themselves. Instead, they take that hurt home and sit with it in the middle of the night. While you are sleeping soundly, they are awake at 2 a.m. performing emotional alchemy. They are working overtime to find the most generous possible interpretation of your bad behavior. They tell themselves they didn't mean it, they're just stressed about work, or they only acted that way because of their difficult childhood. They become your unofficial therapist and your most devoted defense attorney, all without you ever asking. They translate your cruelty into the language of your own suffering so that they can find a way to keep loving you. They will excuse you 1,000 times more than you actually deserve to be excused, essentially setting themselves on fire to keep you warm. This internal labor is what makes them the most loyal people you will ever meet. An empath will stay in a collapsing building and try to hold up the roof with their bare hands as long as they believe there is a spark of genuine connection left. They will endure the weight of your unprocessed baggage for years, quietly absorbing the impact of your moods. But this loyalty has a very specific expiration date. It isn't a choice they make with their mind. It's a decision made by their nervous system. Every time they absorb a wound, a data point is recorded. Every time they are forced to manage an invisible conflict, their internal safety meter drops. They are constantly measuring the cost of being in your presence, and they are willing to pay a high price for a long time. However, there is a final threshold where the cost simply becomes too high to survive. One day, the burden becomes so heavy that their internal system finally hits its limit and shuts down. The loyalty that seemed unshakable is suddenly replaced by a cold, clear-eyed realization. The emotional defense attorney finally rests their case. They stop making excuses for you, and they stop trying to interpret your silence. The moment their nervous system decides that your environment is no longer safe for their soul, the connection is severed permanently. They don't leave because they are weak. They leave because they have finally realized that they cannot save you if it means they have to lose themselves. By the time they walk away, they have already fought 1,000 invisible wars for you, and they simply have no more fight left to give. The downfall of a relationship with an empath rarely happens because of one massive explosion. Instead, it is eroded by 3 specific toxic behaviors that act like a slow-acting poison. These aren't always loud or obvious. They are quiet, repetitive patterns that systematically drain the empath until they have nothing left to give. The first of these is emotional outsourcing. This happens when you refuse to take responsibility for your own internal state and instead force the empath to carry it for you. You walk into the house and radiate a heavy, dark mood without saying a word. You might let out a sharp sigh, slam a cupboard slightly too hard, or go into a brooding silence. Because the empath is wired to feel your energy as if it's happening inside their own chest, they cannot ignore it. They feel your discomfort so intensely that they are forced to drop everything to fix the atmosphere. They start performing for you, asking what's wrong, trying to cheer you up, or tiptoeing around you to avoid a blow-up. In this dynamic, you are outsourcing the work of your own emotional regulation to them. You get to be moody, while they have to do the exhausting labor of managing the room's temperature just so they can breathe. Over time, They realize their own peace is entirely dependent on your moods, and that is a burden no nervous system can sustain forever. The second silent killer is conditional presence. This is one of the most painful patterns an empath can experience because it feels like a betrayal of the safety they thought they had. In this scenario, your warmth, your attention, and your love are treated like rewards rather than a foundation. When the empath is easy, when they are happy, supportive, and asking for absolutely nothing, you are wonderful to them. You are attentive, affectionate, and present. But the moment they bring a heavy emotion into the room, the temperature changes. If they express a hurt, set a boundary, or show vulnerability that requires you to step up, you instinctively pull back. You don't necessarily get angry, you just cool off. You become distant, dismissive, or suddenly too busy to talk. The empath, who tracks every fluctuation in connection, notices this immediately. They learn that their value in the relationship is tied to their ability to remain low maintenance. They begin to feel that they are only loved for what they can provide, not for who they are. They realize that while they are willing to sit with you through your darkest moments, you are only willing to show up for their highlights. This realization creates a profound sense of loneliness that eventually becomes more painful than being alone. The third and most destructive behavior is rewriting history. This is a direct attack on the empath's most vital tool, their perception. An empath's entire way of navigating the world is built on the accuracy of what they feel and observe. When they come to you and say, "That comment you made earlier really hurt me," and you respond with, "I never said that," or "You're just overthinking it again," you are doing more than just disagreeing. You are attempting to edit their reality. This is a subtle form of gaslighting that tells the empath that their senses are lying to them. You wrap your dismissal in logic or tell them they are too sensitive until they begin to doubt their own eyes and ears. Because they are naturally introspective, they will actually try to believe you. They will spend hours wondering if they really did misremember the event or if they are, in fact, being dramatic. But eventually, the evidence of their own experience becomes too loud to ignore. They realize that by staying with you, they are being forced to abandon their own truth just to keep the peace. When an empath has to choose between trusting you and trusting themselves, they will eventually choose themselves every single time. Once they realize you are a threat to their mental clarity, they don't just leave the room, they leave the relationship for good. By the time you actually notice that an empath has become distant, you are seeing the final echoes of a decision that was likely made months or even years ago. What people fail to understand is that for an empath, the breakup doesn't happen when they move out. It happens when they stop feeling safe enough to show up as themselves. This is the stage of ambiguous loss, a deeply painful period where the relationship is technically still alive, but the soul of it has already died. They are still physically present. They still show up to dinner. They still ask about your day, and they still answer your texts. But the person you knew is no longer behind those eyes. They are essentially mourning you while they are still sitting right next to you. They are grieving the version of us they fought so hard to save, finally realizing that the person they are in love with is no longer the person standing in front of them. It is a slow, silent funeral that they are attending every single day, all while maintaining the appearance that everything is normal. In this stage, the empath replaces genuine intimacy with a state of being careful. Intimacy requires openness, vulnerability, and the belief that your inner world will be handled with care. But once an empath has been dismissed or gaslit enough times, they learn that being open is a liability, so they quietly reroute their energy. They stop sharing their big, vulnerable dreams with you. They stop telling you about the fears that keep them up at night. They stop bringing you the raw version of their thoughts because they no longer trust you to hold them without dropping them. Instead, They give you the surface level version of themselves, the polite, low risk, edited version that won't get hurt when you pull back. They aren't being cold, they are being protective. They have checked out of the emotional contract of the relationship and are simply waiting for the practical physical reality to catch up with the exit their spirit already made. They are just going through the motions until they finally find the strength to close the door for good. If there is still a tiny window of time left to save the connection, you need to understand one vital truth. An apology will not save it. Most people think that saying, "I'm sorry," is a magic wand that wipes the slate clean. But to an empath, an apology without change is just a reset button. They've heard the words 1,000 times before, and they've watched those words dissolve into the exact same toxic patterns just a few days later. To them, your words have lost their value. When you say you're sorry but don't change your behavior, it signals to their nervous system that you aren't actually remorseful, you're just trying to get back to a baseline where you can feel comfortable again. An apology is a statement about the past, but an empath is looking at the future. They don't want your guilt, they want repair. Repair is fundamentally different from an apology because repair is behavioral and sustained. While an apology is something you say, repair is something you do over a long period of time. It is the hard, unglamorous work of changing the way you show up. Genuine repair means noticing when you are about to emotionally outsource your bad mood and choosing to hold your own discomfort instead of dumping it on the empath. It means being the same reliable, kind person on your worst days that you are on your best ones. Trust for an empath isn't like a light switch that you can just flip back on with a nice gesture or a bouquet of flowers. It is a slow, methodical accumulation of new evidence. Their nervous system is a data collector. It is constantly watching to see if you are finally safe to be around. Every time you handle a difficult moment with maturity, every time you listen without getting defensive, and every time you choose to be consistent, you add a new data point to the record. Only when the record of your change becomes louder than the record of your hurt will the empath even consider opening that window again. When an empath finally walks away and disappears from your life, your first instinct might be to view it as a punishment. You might see it as a cold, calculated move designed to hurt you or make you feel the weight of your mistakes. But you have to understand that for the empath, this has nothing to do with revenge. It is not a weapon they are using against you. It is a shield they are finally holding up for themselves. This is what we call an act of self-authorship. For years, they have allowed you to write the script of their lives. They played the supporting character, the emotional anchor, and the silent fixer in your drama. They spent their energy editing themselves to fit into the spaces you left for them. But in the final reclamation, they are taking the pen back. They are deciding that they are no longer willing to be a footnote in someone else's story, while their own needs go unread and ignored. This moment of leaving is the first time they are speaking the language of their own needs out loud, even if that language is silence. For an empath, loving themselves more is a radical, terrifying act. It requires them to dismantle the belief that their only value lies in how well they can care for others. When they disappear, they are reclaiming their time, their peace, and their mental clarity. They are choosing to exist in a space where they don't have to monitor your microexpressions or manage your moods just to feel safe. They are finally prioritizing the inner world that was previously erased or dismissed. They aren't leaving to teach you a lesson. They are leaving because they have finally learned the most important lesson of all, that their loyalty to themselves must be greater than their loyalty to a connection that is draining them dry. If you are the person who lost an empath, you need to sit with a very uncomfortable truth. Your intentions do not matter as much as you think they do. You might genuinely be a good person who never meant to cause pain. You might have been carrying your own unprocessed trauma, or perhaps you were simply unaware of how much you were taking. But intention does not determine impact. You can wound someone deeply without ever meaning to, just like you can break a glass without intending to drop it. The glass is still shattered, regardless of your why. The empath's nervous system doesn't register your good heart or your stressed out excuses. It registers the consistent pattern of being dismissed, outsourced, and diminished. They didn't leave because they stopped loving you. In fact, many empaths leave while they are still deeply in love. They left because they realized that loving you was costing them their very soul, and they finally decided that they were worth saving. This reclamation is not a straight line. It is a long, difficult process of finding the way back to themselves. The version of them that spent years shrinking and contorting to keep you comfortable doesn't just vanish overnight. They have to relearn how to trust their own perception after being told for so long that they were too sensitive or overthinking it. They have to rebuild their life from the ground up, moving toward spaces where their depth is seen as a gift rather than a burden. They are moving toward a future where they can bring their whole, unfiltered self into a room without fear. This isn't just the end of a relationship. It is the beginning of their real life. They have finally stopped fighting for a seat at a table where they weren't being fed, and they are off to build a table of their own. If you recognize yourself in this story, whether you're the one pulling away or the one watching a loved one grow distant, understand that clarity is the only way out of the fog. A relationship built on emotional labor and invisible conflict is not a partnership. It is an assignment. For the empath, the choice to leave is not an act of cruelty, but a necessary reclamation of their own life. It is the moment they decide that being understood is not a luxury, but a requirement for staying. And for those left behind, it is a wake-up call to realize that love without genuine presence and consistent repair is just a hollow promise. The goal of understanding the empath's journey is not just to survive a breakup, but to finally build connections where the full weight of your soul is welcomed, not just managed. This is where the old patterns die and where a truly authentic life begins. Now it is time for you to take an honest look at your own inner circle. If you are feeling that quiet withdrawal, don't ignore what your nervous system is telling you. Your perception is not a flaw, it is your greatest strength. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever experienced that random Tuesday where you just knew you were done? Or are you currently fighting to repair a connection before the window shuts? Share your story and let's start a conversation about what it really means to protect your peace. If this breakdown helped you find the words for what you've been feeling, make sure to like this video and subscribe. We dive deep into the psychology of relationships and the hidden dynamics of the human heart every single week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Your journey to self-authorship starts today.